you? It's fantastic.
I'm reading that book too.
Wow. And we should say Barnes & Noble is a great place to get this book. We should thank them for hosting us today.
So much.
Yes, absolutely. How are you, Alafair?
I'm pretty good. How are you, Karin?
I'm very well. I'm very happy to be here with one of my favorite authors. And
my favorite authors too. It's a mutual love fest.
Oh, it is a bounty. So we're going to talk a little bit. Let me make sure my watch is going so we don't go over time and bore people to death. And then I've got some questions that people submitted ahead of time. And I am not going to be looking at the chat, but Alafair is, because she can multitask. So if there's like something important, like, oh, Karin, you look so beautiful today.
That means I have to figure out how to. I see it.
There, yeah, post it there, and then Alafair will tell me. So how do I know you, Alafair? How did we meet?
You know what? I knew that this was going to be one of the questions that somebody would ask. So I had to like stop and think about it. So I think we met at a bookstore in California around the LA Book Festival. Does that sound right to you?
That sounds right to me.
I'm gonna guess circa 2007. Is that what you would guess?
Yeah, we were still in high school. What was the store? What was the name of that store? Do we remember? God, it was so long ago.
Remember Bobby worked there? Shoot, isn't that terrible?
Right. I've stumped
Great
you.
bookstore that unfortunately is gone.
Well, I remember one of your students attended, and she got your book, and she was like, "Oh, are you a New York Times bestseller?" And I was thinking, "Oh, are you a Supreme Court justice?" Because it's very, very rare to be a New York Times bestseller, which you are. Amazingly, a New York Times bestseller, very well earned. So tell us, Alafair, where you were born.
I was born in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, believe it or not, which most people don't know, because if they know who my dad is, they think I'm born in Louisiana. But my dad had moved down there. My parents moved down there because my dad got a job at Miami-Dade Community College. So we lived in Fort Lauderdale, like a little outside of Fort Lauderdale. So until I was 8, and then we moved to Wichita, Kansas. And then I moved away from there when I was 17 to go to college. So.
Is that why you're a teacher? Because your dad was? Or is it just for the respect and the money?
So, you know, the way you make a big bucks with a law degree is to go teach other people to be lawyers. I'm not very good at picking professions that pay a lot. No, how did I decide to become a law professor? You know, I think when I was in college, I went to a college that kind of breeds people to be future academics. And I decided to be a law professor because I was really interested in the law. So, and you don't need a PhD. I could just go to law school. I did that. But then I was a prosecutor for about 5 years, and then I was in private practice for a couple of years. And I still teach law school. I've been teaching at Hofstra Law School since 2001, which seems impossible.
That's a long time. So what do you think you're known for, like as a writer?
Oh God, you're really going right in there.
This is serious. I can't drop any F-bombs. I can't curse. I gotta get my game face on.
What am I known for? Well, I would like to, I will not be self-deprecating. I think I am known for having really good plots. I think I'm an excellent plotter. And I have theories about why that is. Like, I love puzzles. And I also think as a lawyer, you are used to breaking down information into little tiny pieces and then putting them back together in a different way. Notice I keep going like this because I do think of it like visually like a puzzle. So I think I'm a really good plotter. I think I could put a lot of things in a book and have it not feel random. You're right. It all does tie together, even though in the middle of the book it might feel like, what is going on? So I think I'm a very good plotter. And then I also think my characters, I put a lot of work, and I know you do too, into creating characters, particularly female characters that feel real, you know, that are not, I mean, I think it's not like every single, you know, I've had 2 different series that I wrote. I wrote a series with Mary Higgins Clark. I've had several standalones, almost all that have female main characters. And I don't feel like it's like, oh, you pick it up and they're all interchangeable. Like I think Ellie Hatcher is different from Samantha Kincaid. And I think all of the, protagonists in my standalones are very distinctive people. So I think characterization also.
I would agree with it.
I think people are having some people are saying echo and some aren't. I think if just one of us puts in, sorry about this, I'm gonna grab my ear pods. I was just charging them real fast. I didn't think we needed them. I'm sorry, everyone's gonna see that I don't have any shoes on. Keep talking, Karen.
Better you than me. I don't have any pants on.
Keep talking.
Music interlude.
All right.
Okay. All right, cool. Did that solve it, Alafair?
Maybe that'll be better.
Now they're saying no audio.
Oh boy.
I think that's just you, Rose. Okay. So everybody else has audio. So all right. So you're talking
Thanks,
about your
people.
plots. Yeah, everybody cool? The audio is fine. We're just gonna go with whatever they say.
Okay. All right. Okay.
So I know for a fact you're very good at puzzles. And I know
I
you
like
approach
puzzles.
it seems to me as a lawyer, you approach everything like, oh, is that true? Right?
Yes. I can only, yeah.
You're a bit skeptical. That's probably a good way to put it. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And that might not be your legal training. That might just be because you come from such a large family.
I'm hardwired. Yeah. My siblings are 5 to 9 years older than me and pulled no punches. I mean, not physically. Yeah. Like they would deal with me as a peer. And so I was used to getting razzed like as a child. So yeah, I know how to deal with stuff. So
Yeah.
I definitely don't take things, at a facial level. I'm kind of very scrutinizing, put it that way.
Yes, I would agree with that. There's also something people should know about. So I'm gonna talk about Mary Higgins Clark, was a wonderful person. I mean, everybody knows she was a wonderful writer, but she was also a wonderful person, had a wicked sense of humor. And we would usually exchange birthday cards around Christmas because both of our birthdays were around Christmas.
Yeah.
So it's really sad for me not to get a card from her or send her a sexually inappropriate card. So one of the first times I met her, I was sitting with her at the Edgar Awards, which is sponsored by the Mystery Writers of America. And I was talking about the awards not really being given to women very much. And Mary said that when she first started out, the men at MWA didn't want her to join, right?
Really?
And that there was a lot of pushback. They didn't respect her work. She wasn't a tough writer. She wasn't.
We definitely talked about that.
Yeah. And I said, wow. And she named some names and she said, and where are they now? And they were all dead. And Mary was still there. So it's still the fact that it's a sausage fest, really. More men win than women, but very few women of color win these awards or have won these awards. So how does it feel to be a woman of color and you're in basically the boss of MWA right now?
The boss. So yes, I am the first woman of color to be elected as the president of Mystery Writers America, not the boss, but the president, which is such an honor. I mean, I have to say, like, I take things with a grain of salt, but when, for some reason, somebody circulated the full list of all of the people who had been president of the Mystery Writers of America, and to see my name in that company, like it was kind of, I let myself have a little moment and be like, okay, that's pretty cool. Let me appreciate that for a second. And I think it does change. Like when I first started going to BoucherCon, and kind of the big mystery conferences, for people who don't know what that is, it's one of many big, it's like Comic-Con but for mysteries, and it was unusual for me, just given the kinds of places I've grown up and where I live, to be in such a sea of like really white faces. And you wouldn't think, if I'm saying that, if I'm the brownest person there, that it's not a particularly diverse thing. So I think a lot of people are like, wait, she's a person of color. So my mom's Chinese, for people who don't know. But the fact that it's not considered, I think the conferences make a much better attempt now to be more inclusive. But I think more importantly, you know, I think that when I first started writing, I mean, I remember an editor telling me my second book, I think, is a Samantha Kincaid novel called Missing Justice. And no, it's Close Case. Not terrible. It's Close Case. My third Samantha Kincaid book. But in any event, this was in 2005, and you know, one of the plots, one of the cases in the book that she's working is a shooting that takes place during protests in Portland, Oregon, in response to a police shooting of a Black woman. And that's what a book I wrote in 2005 was about. And I remember my paperback publisher saying, like, you can't write that. Like, no one wants to read that. No one wants to hear about Black people protesting about police. Like, you should be writing this kind of book instead. And no one would say that now. I mean, no editor that book I wrote in 2005, there would be an auction for it now. You know, that's what people want their books set in the real world, I think, for the most part. And the real world isn't the world that people were necessarily writing about, you know, in the 80s and 90s, when, you know, none of this stuff was being talked about and almost all the characters were white. So if you kind of see the direction of crime fiction, I think some of the most exciting kind of conversations about our current world are happening in crime fiction. So I think they kind of go hand in hand, sort of what the stories are about, but also who's writing them. So I think it's great that, you know, there's a group called Crime Writers of Color that has made a big impact, I think. And, you know, so many of those writers are kind of finding really successful publication routes now, where in the past, I think they would have been pigeonholed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember walking into a now defunct bookstore chain, and they had like Black fiction, you know, and it was just all the Black writers. Yeah. Fiction, children's books, right? Yeah, cookbooks. Yeah. It was like, okay, well, I mean, in a romance, you know, all of that stuff but I think also in 2007, publishing wasn't diverse. And so when a publisher says that, what he's really saying is, I don't want to read a book about that, and I'm deciding for the rest of the world. And I think that's changed over the years, at least from what I've seen. So we're all glad about that. And now that you're boss of MWA, I expect some kind of award.
Clearly, I'm gonna,
yeah. You know, you're the boss. So let's talk about your book.
I did have when we were.
Oh, go ahead. No.
I'll tell you later.
People are gonna want to know. So Find Me is the book. There. Holy crap! I'm on the whole screen now. So Megan Abbott called this a knockout serpentine in structure, rich in emotional health, deeply moving. Blah blah blah. I mean, serpentine in structure. What the hell, Megan? What the hell, Megan?
She does have a PhD.
I know, that's right. She gives the best blurbs, but she's also very picky because she only blurbs the things that she really loves. So you've got a lot of people on here saying it's great. So we should believe them, I think. Or people can believe me. The best part to me is the quote you chose. I mean, this is annoying because you can't really sign on this unless you use like.
I use silver Sharpies, and it's very pretty and blingy. You would like it, Karin.
But they run out more quickly, don't they? Like they dry out.
That's true. I'm going through a lot of Sharpies.
Yeah.
Okay, but you were going to talk about the quote.
Yeah. So it's from Thelma and Louise, and I know that I would go over a cliff in a car for you. I mean, that's a spoiler alert. A lot of your friends would, right?
That's nice.
But why did you choose that? Because of the mass suicide or because of the friendship?
We're trying to make people want to read this book. There is no mass suicide in it. There's so the quote that she's talking about, so the epigraph at the beginning of Find Me is Louise, no matter what happens, I'm glad I came with you, from Thelma and Louise. And it's that notion of, you know, two friends deeply committed, you know, ride or die, even though they're not literally going off a cliff together, but that you would do anything for your friends, right? And so the two friends in this book that I think form the heart of the book for me are Hope Miller and her best friend, Lindsay Kelly. And they met in a very unusual way 15 years ago. Lindsay is coming home. She just graduated from college. She's driving back to the small town in New Jersey that she's from NYU, where she went to college. New York, where she went to college. And she comes across in the pouring rain an overturned SUV, and finds a woman who's been thrown from the cabin. And she assumes that she's dead. Like, she looks like it's impossible that she's dead. She goes, and it's a long story, but she literally saves her life, and stays with her in the ambulance and goes and visits her in the hospital as she recovers. And that's kind of their origin story 15 years ago. And now in the present, Hope, the one from the car accident, wants to start over again. She wants to leave this small town where everybody thinks of her as that woman from the car accident. And she moves to East Hampton to go live at the beach and try to kind of be anonymous out there. And just weeks after moving there, she disappears. And Lindsay will stop at nothing to find her. So that's kind of the find meaning. But the other interesting thing about Hope is the car accident, although she recovers from her physical, it's not a spoiler, it's right on the book. Although she recovers from her physical injury, she never gets her memories back. So she was thrown from the vehicle. She had no identification with her, no money, no recollection of who she was, where she came from, or why she was in a car that turned out to be stolen. So that, you talked about me being skeptical, right? Naturally, if Hope's in a stolen car, a young woman, no ID, no money, some of the people in the town are like, we have to save her, that she's going to become our town girl. Like, our town's going to pitch in and help this woman start over again. But obviously there are some skeptics who wonder, like, who is this woman? Is she telling the truth? What's her story? And maybe people will be skeptical for a little while, but over the course of 15 years, people have come to trust her. They don't even think of her necessarily as having amnesia anymore, because for 15 years, she's kind of built a new life. But when she goes missing, that new life kind of gets blown open. And Lindsay has to kind of jump into old questions to maybe try to answer the new ones.
Well, I mean, she is a criminal. She stole a car.
Well, we just know she was in a stolen car, so we don't know.
Right. We don't know. Possibly a killer, a murderer, serial killer.
Or running from somebody else, right? And so those are the kinds of questions Lindsay has to reopen if she wants to find her friend. Arguably, she has to look into the past. And part of the reason why I really like the title "Find Me" is it's not just a literal search for finding Hope. It's also this question of identity, right? Finding the real me, who is Hope? Is she just this persona that she's had to assume without knowing her past? I mean, how well can you really know yourself if you don't know your past? And it's also a question for Lindsay of, am I potentially doing, if it's the case that she left voluntarily because she wanted to start over again, or maybe she's in danger and needs to hide from something, am I going to wind up actually hurting her by reopening all of these doors that have been closed for so long?
Well, I've always been fascinated by amnesia or dementia, because like I had this great aunt who was a really horrible person, and she developed dementia and she forgot all the things that made her horrible. And she was like the sweetest little old lady. And we were like, well, is it right to really love her now because she's so sweet?
Right. Is that who she actually is?
Right.
That's a good example of that. The question I'm talking about in terms of identity. Are you just the person that you're being today? I mean, defined by your deeds of the day, or, is there a way to close the door on the things in the past? You get to start over again.
Yeah, I guess it's kind of like when people drink a lot of alcohol and they do stupid things that are like, oh, it wasn't me, it was the alcohol. And I always think, no, it's you. It's just the alcohol turned off that part that doesn't make you behave the way you want to.
Yeah. Is the real you the drunk you, or is the real you the mean drunk, or is the real you the nice sober person? Yeah.
Yeah. Who needs friends around him for when he's drunk.
That's kind of, so the question is, who's Hope? And in terms of writing it, and Karin, you would know this because you've kind of had similar situations where you have somebody who's not on the page and yet you need the reader to feel invested in them. So, I think of Hope as the main character in the book. The main characters are Hope and Lindsay, but Hope's gone, right? You enjoy that prologue with her, because you're going to be learning about other people for quite a while after that. So kind of the challenge of writing the book was showing Hope through multiple people's eyes.
Right.
And the reader through that process learns not just about her, right? If you interview 10 people and ask about me, you find out I'm great, I'm sure, but you'll find out not just a lot of information about me by talking to 10 people. You'll learn about those 10 people too, like the things that they emphasize show something about what they value or how they see the world. And so she almost kind of becomes this prism through which you get to know the other characters.
Holy crap. I always tell people you're amazing. Does that mean I don't think I'm amazing? Okay, save it for therapy. But let's.
It means that you value amazingness.
That's right. If only. Well, I do value that you're one of the smartest people I know. So that's like a thing. But you kind of base this off something you read about, right? That the amnesia aspect.
Yeah, not any even particular thing. So I've been fascinated by memory for a really long time. Like my senior thesis in college, but way back, was like on the effects of emotion on memory and how that makes eyewitness identification, how it makes eyewitness identification potentially unreliable. I mean, so I said I always knew I wanted to be a professor. If I hadn't gone to law school, I was going to get a PhD in cognition and teach about memory. So in any event, I've always been fascinated by that side of it, including the science part of it. And then meanwhile, as a storyteller, whenever I read a crime story or some other kind of human story that interests me, I literally still have a folder that contains newspaper articles that I would cut out with scissors. Now it's like you bookmark it, right, and dump it in a folder on your computer. But I've always cut out these. There are actually multiple stories of people appearing under unusual circumstances out of nowhere, apparently from places they're not from, with no explanation of how they got there or why they're there, claiming not to know any of that, right? That they're in this fugue state. And some people come out of it, and sometimes they go in and out of it, but sometimes people live like that for years. And so I always kind of wanted to do something with that idea, like, what is it like to be one of those people? Like, at what point do you stop looking, right? There's a lot of books that ask that question about, grieving parents or a grieving spouse, where the person, someone you really love, goes missing for years. And it gets to the point that you almost want to hear the bad news so that you have quote unquote closure, but that you at least have an answer, but at what point do you stop waking up every single day and that's the only priority, is to find that person? So, but what if the missing person is yourself, right? At what point do you just say, screw it, I guess I'm never going to know this. I'll take the bird in hand and live the best life I can. And, so Hope at some point just figures, what I do know about myself is I didn't have any money, didn't have any ID, and was apparently a very bad driver in a stolen car, and no one's come for me. Right? Why isn't anyone looking for me? And so at some point she comes to think, whatever is left behind sounds like it might not be the best life. And meanwhile, I've got this town full of people who are willing to care, like help me start over. I've got this nice lady who will let me work in her diner. I've got this nice couple that will let me live in their garage apartment. I've got this girl who found me by the side of the road and is like, got me, and like, almost as like a sister at some point. So she just kind of moves on with her life. So I was fascinated by that idea, like that shift. But then of course, because we write crime novels, like something's got to happen. So I was like, that's kind of a good idea. That was sort of the original premise of someone builds a new life, but then when they go missing again, what does that mean, right? Did they get their memory back and did they leave? Did they go into a different fugue state? So now that maybe she doesn't know that she's Hope and she's lost, like with amnesia again, or maybe, like I said, maybe her past has caught up with her.
Well, who's tasked with finding her?
Well, Lindsay primarily. So Lindsay will stop at nothing.
And Lindsay's a lawyer. She's a lawyer, like
she is,
like someone you know.
Yeah, she's a criminal defense attorney. And what I like about this character and also her story is she's only in. They only show her in court, I think, once. I think she's only in court one time in the whole book. they don't really, it's not, her intelligence isn't defined by her job as a lawyer. It's just the way her brain works. So, like, she's pretty savvy. And at one point they even talk about the fact that, like, there's the way the law is on paper and the way the real world actually works. And she kind of just knows how to work those angles. So very early on in the book, she goes looking for her friend Hope, and finds out that Hope was staging an open house for this kind of shady realtor. So she goes to the house, convinces the woman to let her into the house, finds what she thinks looks like a bloodstain, and then convinces a very skeptical police officer to kind of humor her, like, okay, if it's nothing for me to worry about, why don't you come in here with the black light and show me, like, prove to me it's not blood and I'll leave. And then it is blood. And then she convinces him to put it through the national DNA databases, and it hits to a cold case in Wichita, Kansas from 30 years ago. So then she starts to get very confused. And then another little layer of the plot.
What do you know about Kansas?
I know.
That sounds like Ellie Hatcher territory. Am I warm?
So I don't know how many people on here with us know about Ellie Hatcher, but so I said I have had a couple of series. One of my series characters is NYPD detective Ellie Hatcher, and it's not an Ellie Hatcher book for reasons we can talk about. Dead Connection.
Excellent book.
Yeah. And then there are 5 books in that series. She hasn't been around for a while, but her backstory, even though she's an NYPD detective, is this serial killing case in Wichita, Kansas, that kind of haunts her for personal reasons. That she has always thought that there were unresolved issues there. So when Lindsay gets a hit between her missing friend Hope and this very old serial killing case from 30 years ago in Kansas, kind of the two of them get together for very different reasons, right? Lindsay probably doesn't really care about a serial killing from 30 years ago unless some guy's still out there and has her friend. Her motivation is to find her friend. Ellie, as a police officer, is kind of skeptical of, yeah, right, your friend has amnesia, She's a little dubious of these two women, but she now knows that there's a DNA sample from, Long Island in the present that somehow connects to this case that has haunted her whole life. So she kind of starts looking into the case kind of from her own personal perspective, and the searches might kind of run together in surprising ways.
Now, you yourself have a connection to a Kansas serial killer. Is that correct?
Connection, yeah. My uncle. No, I'm just kidding.
But now you can tell the truth about your dad. It's not true. It's not true.
He's a national treasure. Do not talk trash about my dad or Mary Higgins Clark, because we will have to have a fight.
Oh no,
I will have a fight.
Mary.
Don't even joke.
Why would you drag Mary into this?
Because
Mary could kill Mary.
Those are my elders.
Yeah, Mary, that's true. Yeah.
I'm fiercely protective of those my elders. So in any event, not my dad, but my dad can be somewhat blamed for this because he's the one who moved us to Wichita, Kansas. At the time we moved there, all I really knew, because I was young and didn't know much, was Southern Florida had a beach, and Wichita, Kansas did not have a beach. So I was like, yeah, no, I don't need to go. I'll find I'm young enough that somebody might still adopt me. I'm staying here. Also, Andy Gibb lived in Florida, which was another reason I did not want to leave.
Tiger beat up.
They kind of, it took me dragging and screaming to, kicking and screaming to Wichita, Kansas. But the enticement was, we're going to have a nicer house. You won't have to share a bedroom with both of your sisters. You'll go to a better school. They made it sound like, I was moving to Leave It to Beaverly. I was going to have such a great life. And we get there and we had barely moved in. And, my dad to this day still always has the news playing in the background. And the news guy comes on and says that there's a serial killer that's running around killing women and children, including children. And I'm like, hey, great place you moved me to. but they didn't catch him for 30 years. So for people who don't know what case I'm talking about, it's the Btk Serial Killer, which stood for bind, torture, and kill. And some parents would have, with those three words appeared next to each other on the local news, would turn the TV off, but not my parents. So instead, it was, we sat around talking about BTK as like a family hobby. But if you grew up in Wichita around that time, it's not just me with my crime and dad. The way people grew up there, like I think about it now, it's so weird. It was routinized. Like you'd come home and the first thing you would do is, this is back when we all had landlines, you would check your phone to make sure that the phone line hadn't been cut, because when he got into people's houses, he'd cut the phone cords so that people couldn't help. Everybody had bolts on their basement doors because they thought he came in through the basement. So for years, to the extent people have laundry down in the basement, I used to run down to the basement, like throw the laundry in, like run back upstairs and bolt the door. Not normal stuff. So yeah, that I've never written about that case specifically, but I've always been really fascinated by it. And because I didn't want to give him any more attention, I kind of asked myself what I found so fascinating about it. And it wasn't he's a remarkably uninteresting person, actually.
Yeah.
But it was the effect upon this community that prides itself. Like the reason why my dad, it's not like he could sell me on Wichita, Kansas for like its mountains or the beaches, it's like wheat and corn. I mean, it's a very nice, lovely community, but it's not the topography that's going to sell you on Wichita, Kansas. It was that this is a safe, this is a safe, wholesome place to raise a family. And then you've got this guy, running around doing all these like crazy, evil things. And for me, I think what I found interesting was just that juxtaposition of, it's in cold blood. It's the same idea that like you're supposed to be in this. You've made a choice to live this kind of wholesome, safe existence outside from like the dangerous cities, and then like evil enters. And just the idea of Ellie having grown up, not just in Wichita, but with a father, I hadn't mentioned that her father was the main investigator on that case and was never able to forgive himself for not catching the guy. And Ellie's never really been able to accept that. She kind of has always wanted to know the truth about what happened. So that's how it became part of her backstory, is just the idea that like as a child to know that kind of darkness existed.
A lot of people, and I know you get this too, ask why we write about dark things.
Yeah.
And I was growing up when the Atlanta child murders were happening. And
sure.
I was more using it as a weapon because I'm the youngest of three. So I was like, oh, he's going to get you. I'd wake my sister up in the middle of the night and say, oh, I think he's in the basement. Will you go look? And, things like that.
Yeah.
Just to kind of scare the crap out of them. And one time I hid under my sister's bed for like an hour, and it was so long I fell asleep. And then she came to get in bed and I grabbed her ankle and she screamed. She screamed loud. She screamed so loud that it scared me. And when my parents came into the room, I was crying in the closet, sobbing, and they got mad at my sister, which is the best thing about being the youngest, is like you never get blamed. So I guess what you can say is I was created, shaped by a serial killer in some ways the same way as you. But you're not the youngest, so you wouldn't understand. You're one of the bossy older ones.
No, I'm the youngest too. I'm just nice.
Why do you act like a bossy older sister all the time? You're always bossing me around.
I'm the baby.
Good Lord, that does not compute.
I wish the chat had a poll function, because if we took a poll and said, who do you think bosses whom, I think people would say that Karen's alpha.
Really? I don't. No. You are incredibly bossy. You're the planner. You're the like, we're gonna do this. We're gonna do that. And I'm like, okay, as long as I don't have to drive. I'm like, fine.
I am the planner, but it's because I care about food more than you do. That's why I plan things.
Okay, that's fair. So let's see. So you don't really read your Amazon reviews because you want to be sane. But I've noticed that I don't read my own. I only read other people's.
Okay. What
but-
are you about to do to me?
No, I'm not. But like some people are posting on Amazon reviews trigger warnings, right? They're like trigger warning, murder.
Okay.
How do you feel about, I didn't see any on yours because I didn't look yet. But how do you feel about trigger warnings?
Well, I mean, one, I don't want to get canceled.
Well, I feel like people should have them, but you should be able to read them if you want to.
Here's
right?
the thing. I don't want to be glib about it. Like,
Yeah.
so
no.
even like as a law professor, I don't teach rape and criminal law. And a lot of people are like, how can you, but most of my students are not going to become prosecutors or defense attorneys. They're in first year criminal law, and like what criminal law adds to the first year curriculum is really like you learn how to read statutes.
Mhm.
And I don't need to talk about rape for 2 weeks, potentially traumatizing people for them to learn
Right.
about statutes, right? If they become prosecutors or defense attorneys, then they can learn how to try a sex offense case. So I can kind of make that decision, right? With fiction, I think it's hard because particularly we write about, we want to surprise people too, right? So it would be kind of hard for me to write a trigger warning for a book without potentially doing spoilers. So I think it almost has to be, it either has to be at such a vague level, like, right? So like, I think I was watching, and now when you watch those streaming shows, which during COVID, I've watched more TV in the last 2 years than I watched in the first 48. I'm loving my TV, but like at the very beginning, they'll have the little warnings, but they'll like, oh, this episode might involve sexual assault and suicide. And I'm like, oh man, now I know what happens. Like, so I kind of, to some extent, I think it should be more like buyer beware. So I shouldn't say that. I think when you read crime fiction, it shouldn't be unsurprising that there's crimes in it, right? So
well, but there's a difference between like when you're writing a book like Find Me and you're writing one for a Mary Higgins Clark reader.
Well, that's what I was going to say is like, I think to some extent it does become branding, it's, I was going to use that exact comparison because, obviously when I wrote with Mary, it's Mary's book first and foremost. And so, and she kind of built a brand for like, no sex on the page, no violence on the page, no profanity. And then, fair enough, like some of her readers, a huge number of her readers, thank you, those of you who are listening, and were like, hey, Alafair seems to be writing this series with Mary, and I like this series. Let's go see what she does on her own. And, for every email I got that said, hey, why do you have to have cuss words? I would get 10 of saying, I know it's a little different, but like, I'm really liking your books as well. So, part of it is the brand issue. And I know you've gotten, some people, you're always asked certain questions about, your books dealing with violence against women, and, how you handle that becomes kind of part of your brand, if that makes sense. I mean, I will say, like, I do think part of, I could probably be more conscious about my brand or whatever, but you said, what are you known for? And I said, the women feel real in my books, as I would say the same about your books as well. To the extent there is, to the extent there are things that are more dark and maybe more potentially upsetting to people, I don't think it's ever just a plot device, right? It's never just like bodies in the dumpster and it's new clues and some cat and mouse game between the killer and the cops or something like that. It's presented, I think, responsibly and is more about the human impact of those kinds of acts rather than, trying to titillate or,
it's really hard because I would not ever want someone who would be disturbed by the unflinching look at some of these topics to read my books. I mean, there's so many wonderful books. And I think, I don't know, I just feel like there should be a way to know the trigger warning if you want to, right? Like click on it and it reveals itself or.
Yeah, right? Julie, I don't know. I think you can't see the chat, but Julie Hestrup, I hope Julie, some of you put it in the chat to everybody, you don't mind me sharing it with people. She said the great thing about a book is you can usually skip over a potentially triggering part unless it's the plot of the whole book, which the book, you would know that from the plot description, like from the
Right.
jacket, you would know the whole book is about this. If a Silence of no, that's not what it's called. The Accused, Jodie Foster,
Oh yeah.
that movie.
Excellent.
I've seen that movie so many times, but once they're like at the pool table, like I'm like, I don't need to watch that. Like it's upsetting to me. Like, and I'm was a prosecutor and I write what I write. So that's a good example, Julie, that if it's
Yeah.
just a couple of pages where it's like, oh, you know, you could maybe skip that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you know it's coming, I think.
Yeah.
I don't disagree.
But
and
wait,
I,
now you're saying, but then you
No,
said,
I
oh,
agree
don't want
with
to give
trigger
spoilers.
I don't
But
want,
you-
I agree with them.
yeah.
I think you should have to like the trigger warnings on this page,
Right.
read it or don't.
Yeah.
Right.
Does someone on Amazon have a trigger warning on this? I'm
No,
sitting
haven't
here
looked
trying to
yet.
like, I'm going through my own head. I'm like,
No, it
is
was
there gonna be a
our,
trigger warning?
it was our buddy Lisa. Lisa Unger had one and it said,
Oh.
possible triggers, murder and guilt, which I felt like they were very like broad.
The guilt?
Guilt.
Oh, okay.
I mean, if you're
My
a
whole
woman,
life
you live
was-
with that every day of your
I was gonna
life,
say,
right?
Given how I was raised, my whole
Yeah.
life would need a trigger warning of guilt.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I just, it struck me because I've been seeing it more. So I thought, I thought it would be interesting to get your opinion on that. But let's move on unless you want to talk
Okay.
some more about something like that.
Yeah.
So we have some questions. Lupita Toscano, I hope I'm saying that correctly. She wants to know if there's any book recommendations. She's reading lots of crime and vintage books lately. So any recommendations?
Obviously, all of Karen's books. You just mentioned Lisa Unger, and her
Yeah.
book in the fall from Last Girl Ghosted is one of my favorite Lisa Unger books. Allison Galen has a new book out called The Collective that is also one of my favorite books from last year. It's got lots of surprising things in it, and it's also a book of kind of written about, you know, a mother, like a grieving mother, like who goes in in a surprising direction, but it's really very good. And then upcoming, Kelly Garrett has a book coming out called Like a Sister. And I love a good sister book, so it's about sisters. And it's one of those books that's it's kind of dark because she's like finding the truth about what happened to her half sister, but it's also just like laugh out loud hilarious. Like there's parts of the dialogue that just like I'm like, I gotta slow down. Like I'm wanting to go like this to find out what's going to happen, but I'm like, I need to like let myself like enjoy these zingers and let myself laugh a little bit too. So I think all those books are great.
What
I can go on all day.
are there any streaming? I'm watching Yellow Jackets and I'm loving it. And the hardest part is accepting that Christina Ricci isn't the coolest one. Because that's how I was raised. It's
I
amazing.
haven't started it yet, but everybody keeps
amazing.
telling me that it's great. Yeah.
Jody Bain wants to know if you're writing more Under Suspicion books. I too want to know, as a lover of Mary Higgins Clark. Are you?
Yes, we are going to try to continue that series. You know, we'll see if it works, but you know, she created that character, Lori Moran, and her world to start with, but I was with her from then on, right? We kind of did it together, so there's no reason that has to go away if the character can continue, and she made it clear that's what she wanted. So I'm going to try to do that. But before that, actually, we had talked about doing a sequel to Where Are the Children?
Oh,
So
wow.
I'm doing that. Yeah.
Holy
I'm gonna
moly.
finish that.
That is one of the most amazing books I've ever read. It was her first,
It's a
right?
lot of responsibility. I mean,
Yeah.
a lot of us love that book. I don't want to mess it up.
I know.
We
I
had-
mean, I believe in
Yeah.
you, but don't screw it up.
I'm gonna have to like hide for a decade if I mess it. I mean, yeah. I mean, that is an iconic book. So, but no, to be more serious about it, not making it about me and the overwhelming sense of responsibility I have to do it correctly. What's so important to me about that book happening is, one, we had talked about it, and you know, for the idea to not get completed, you know, because we lost her too soon would be very sad. But I think people forget how that book is iconic for a reason. Like the themes and Where Are the Children resonate through every contemporary psychological suspense story today, right? That you have a potentially unreliable narrator, you have gaslighting by like a horrible husband in that book, you've got children being put in danger in that book, you've got memory issues in that book, right? She's lost parts of her memory. So I think it would be great if revisiting that book with a sequel is a way to get people to see that those themes, she's had those themes before other people were, doing that. So in any event, that's happening. And then Lori Morin will continue as well. And then I'll keep doing my stuff too. So I just have to write like 4 books a year, which I can't do.
Easy peasy. Well, Teresa Singer, also who wants to be a writer, she's asking, like when you develop your characters, do you have a description list? Do you start at the end and work their way backwards? I mean, how does that work when you've got a character sustained throughout the book? I mean, do you get to the end and go, wait a minute, I want to change everything about her?
Yeah, no, you don't change everything. I think the best way I can describe it is I can't start a book until I have a pretty good sense of, and one of these days I'll get better at explaining it, but I really do think at least for me, it's the key. I can't start until I have a story concept and then a character that belong together. It's almost like matchmaking, right? So the story concept for Find Me is a woman who had amnesia, but starts a new life and is getting along fine, suddenly disappears. It's not really a plot, it's just a concept. But it can't just be like some lady with amnesia. That can't be the thing about her. So I need to find a person who's interesting for other reasons, that has other issues. And that case, right, whatever this plot is she's the right person for that story, if that makes sense. So then I just start writing it. And what happens is, if you take 4 months or 5 months or 2 years to write a first draft, you get to know those characters better as you write, right? They you figure them out better, their backstories better, you hear their voice better. So what I do is once the first draft is built, I go back in. I'm like, okay, now I actually know these people. Like I can picture Lindsay in my head. I know what she has for lunch. I know what makes her tick. I know what her weaknesses are for all these people. And then I go back in and kind of just revisit all their choices and do a rewrite, basically. So, don't think you have to know your characters inside and out when you start, because that's kind of the beauty of editing and rewriting. How about you, Karin?
I daydream all the time. You know this. I'm often just like looking at the sky. And so I play the stories out in my head. I don't really do it on the page. So by the time I sit down to write them, I'm really kind of focused on who that person is and how to, but I don't like sit down and write the list out, or I'll hear music and I'm like, oh, I know this character would love this song, or, and that kind of helps put it together for me. But most of that doesn't appear on the page. I'm not going to write a paragraph about how awesome Juice Newton is, though props, she was wonderful. So it's more in my head than on the paper. I will say, as I get older, it's harder to keep it in my head.
Yeah.
Something has to go, like division or, other skills I have. I got to get rid of them for storage, because it's just like buffering.
And I can't remember who asked the question. You said her name and I can't remember, but you said even keeping character notes. That is a very good thing to do, because to the extent it's going to take you a year or so to write a book, little things might slip. So like, I do make little notes of like, if you mention where they went to school or what their first job was at the mall, like, just keep a little, whatever software you use, keep a little note for continuity, so that you don't have a draft where you've got someone saying their first job was at McDonald's and then they're a mechanic, like on page 60.
Forgot she had an eye patch. I should write that down, because that's like the number one thing my copy editor is picking up on. She's like, okay, well, this character was 30 on this page and now she is 26. Right.
So
Um,
when Mary and I wrote together, I'm sure people will find this humorous. Even though she and I really were pretty connected in terms of story and characterization, like we really were like a well integrated machine. Like it became very organic, but little tiny details, like those kind of quotidian details, like that's the kind of stuff that would get messed up as we were like exchanging pages backwards and forwards. So we had to do like extremely careful reads of the book, like over and over and over again, to look for those continuity errors. Cause like, you know, she would have somebody like offering, like sitting down and having tea. And then I would have written a chapter where she's like, she did not understand how anyone could drink tea. Then we put the pages together and it's like, oops.
Amnesia.
Yeah, exactly. Multiple personality.
We should wind this down a little bit. The last question's from Kathy Salmons, and she asked what you are working on next.
I'm working on a sequel to Where Are the Children that will be out in about a year. And then I'm also working on my next book, which is a standalone about some women who go on vacation together and bad things happen. That's all I'm going to say.
That's a story.
That's a concept
story right there. Like bad things, doesn't like too much alcohol, syphilis, whatever. I'm on board. No, but what about, how are you dealing with the crushing pressure of having to write a sequel to such an iconic book?
Thanks a lot, Karin.
I should say this about Mary. There's one thing that people who've never met her or been around her don't know. And that is as fantastic of an author she is. She was such an advocate for other women. And she was so like, you could ask her anything. She would give you advice. She was so supportive of other authors. I mean, if there's anything, and I met her very early in my career and she was so generous to me. And one of the things I took was, believe it or not, I'm really shy. People who don't know me are surprised by that. And I didn't understand that people don't recognize shyness in other people. They think that you're being rude. And Mary was so generous with everybody she met. Like, it doesn't matter if it was the guy bringing her a drink while she was signing, or everybody she treated very, and I don't know if it's like her good Catholic upbringing or what, but she just genuinely liked everybody. Yeah. She was interested in everybody. And it was an important lesson for me that how you treat everybody matters. So I know that she loved you very much, and I know you're going to do a great job on that book.
Yeah, it means a lot to me that she,
she wouldn't have passed it. She wouldn't have passed that torch to just anybody.
Yeah. Quite a lot. So thank you, Karin. You said nice to everybody. You've been very kind to me today to do this. I appreciate it.
It's been my pleasure. I love doing this with you. Because we can't do it in person because we'll get sick and die.
I know. I canceled all my in-person stuff. So
heartbreaking.
I don't have to wear shoes. I don't have to wear shoes. If I was in Phoenix doing an in-person event like I was supposed to be, I would have to, I'm trying to figure out. So now that I've moved it, I was supposed to be in Phoenix, which is in a different time zone. So those of you who have not heard enough from me can come back to YouTube at Poison Pen's channel and listen to me do Poison Pen Bookstore at 9, but it's 9 p.m. in New York.
Crazy.
It's 7 in Phoenix, I think. So I'm trying to figure out, can I eat dinner? And then, because normally I would get my pajamas like around 10 after I walk, so I could make my husband walk the dogs while I do that. And then could I just, maybe I'll find pajamas. I probably have pajamas that kind of look like clothing.
What do you think I'm wearing? There's literally a sheep on the shirt underneath this. So I think you'll be okay.
Oh, that's a good idea. I could put on pajamas and then put a blazer over it.
Yeah.
I'll look a little sporty.
You don't have a pajama blazer? Okay, I'll send you the link. Oh
no, I know my next president. Are you the one who sent me that unicorn lip gloss, by the way?
The unicorn snot? No, that it was from Lisa.
Yeah, I wasn't
Hunter.
gonna say. I was
I
not
got
gonna
it
say the
too.
name Snot. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. That
Be
was from
careful
Lisa.
because it has glitter. It has glitter in it. And if
Oh,
you,
girl, you know that's why I didn't open it. You know
you'll
my
see it in
version
the
of glitter.
toilet. I'm not going to be specific, but you'll see it in the toilet.
I know. I'm a terrible person. If I open those Christmas card envelopes and I see any glitter, I look at the return address and I say thank you very much, but like the card goes right into the recycle. Like no glitter.
We're learning too
Sorry,
much about
everybody
your
else-
personal life here. Well, but people
well,
should know Lisa's last book about a woman who met a guy on a dating app is based on how you met your husband. But thank you very much, Alafair. Anyone who
is that
wants-
really? Did she really base that on us?
No.
Okay.
Maybe. You'll have to read the book, but people should find me right now
Thank you.
on Barnes and Noble, and we thank our host Barnes and Noble. And
Thank you so much,
very much,
Tina.
Alafair. We're all going to leave now. Bye.